Law at Work is sponsored by Perrett van Niekerk Woodhouse Macholo, leading labour law specialists representing businesses throughout South and Southern Africa, as well as Case Law, the quick, fast and easy labour law search engine.
Hello, I'm Simon Coleman and welcome to The Law at Work. With the recent public sector strike and the CCMA being inundated with general labour disputes, labour negotiators are exploring more efficient methods of mediation. Joining me in the studio is Charles Nupen, Director and Mediator of Tokiso. Welcome, Charles.
Hi, Simon, and thank you.
I apologise for my cold. Charles, in terms of mediation, the country has definitely found itself in the grip of a strike recently. There seem to be a lot more strikes looming on the horizon, and a lot of people are saying that 2007 is the year of the strike. How does mediation work, and how would it impact on those types of negotiations?
Well, mediation is the intervention of a third party, an independent third party, at the request of negotiating parties to assist them to address and hopefully to reconcile on issues on the table that currently divide them.
Right.
Mediation doesn't necessarily transform difficult negotiations into easy engagements, and I think the public sector strike was an example of that. But it does have many advantages. The intervention of a mediator at the appropriate time can help the parties to look at the issues on the table with a fresh perspective.
So timing is a critical factor.
Timing is an absolutely critical factor. The premature intervention of a mediator may mean that the parties don't take his or her interventions seriously enough.
Okay.
So timing is important. So it's about generating fresh ideas, it's about new ways of looking at the issues in dispute, and basically helping the parties to reframe and repackage proposals on the table with a view to helping them to come closer to one another.
Would the function of a mediator be to, say, get a more realistic view of what the parties should be looking at? Because often people seem to come into these negotiations with unrealistic expectations.
Look, I think the mediator will use the skill of reality testing to get parties to look at the implications and the consequences of the views and the positions that they hold to in the negotiation process. If that process introduces what you would term a greater sense of realism into the negotiation, yes, well then it may have that impact.
Okay. Charles, how does the CCMA fit into this picture?
Well, look, the CCMA is without a doubt the premier dispute resolution institution in the labour market. It's a national institution. It manages literally tens of thousands of disputes each year, and in that sense produces an extremely valuable social service. But the Labour Relations Act also recognises that other institutions, be they bargaining councils or indeed private agencies like Tokiso, also have an important role to play. And parties who wish to engage the services of private institutions are at liberty to do so, and that choice is sanctioned under the Labour Relations Act.
Now, I would assume that the parties have to agree on the mediator. No one party would have the ability or the authority to appoint a mediator.
Well, it differs. Under statutory mediation, and the CCMA operates as a statutory body, the parties, unless in very limited circumstances, do not have the right to choose their mediator.
Okay.
The CCMA will appoint a mediator for them. But in private dispute resolution, the process is entirely voluntary, and the parties would need to agree either the mediator or the process by which the mediator is appointed.
Okay. Charles, in terms of the mediator, does this individual have the ability to make decisions that are binding on the parties?
No, that would be the role of an arbitrator. A mediator assists the negotiation process. The outcome of that process is always in the hands of the parties. It's they who decide whether to settle or not to settle. The mediator is there as a person who assists them to try and reconcile.
So coming back to the public sector strike we're looking at, even an excellent mediator could only make suggestions. The parties would still have to agree on the terms of that.
Exactly. And that's why parties tend to prefer in interest disputes like wage disputes, mediation over arbitration, because they at all times maintain control over the outcome. Right. But the media, and certainly my co-mediator Mishak Ravuku and I, during the course of the public sector strike, on numerous occasions made proposals to the parties to reframe their thinking on the issues and to induce movement towards settlement.
Right. Now, once the parties have entered into a mediation process, this doesn't obviously preclude them from approaching, say, arbitration at a later date.
That is correct. Should the mediation fail to assist the parties to reach a settlement, other dispute resolution options are open to parties, and arbitration is one of those. So they may determine that rather than follow other avenues in the law, that arbitration and bringing in a third party to hear their cases and to make a decision for them would be, for them, the most appropriate way to go.
Okay. Charles, you mentioned earlier that both the CCMA and Tokiso, for instance, are involved in mediation. Yeah. Why would an employer, or why would the parties choose one over the other?
Well, I think parties who have resources and who are prepared to pay for mediation, because organizations like Tokiso are not non-profit organizations, right, may choose to employ the services of a mediator through Tokiso, because they do have the element of choice. They can choose the mediator that they want.
They can choose the actual individual.
They can choose the individual and in this sort of process. And they can also have, I think, a greater degree of influence over the timing of the mediation. Right. With statutory processes that take place under the CCMA, the institution itself will determine when the process will take place, and as I've said previously, will determine who the mediator in any given dispute will be.
Okay. Charles, in terms of general unfair dismissals, things like that, these obviously are referred to the CCMA or to the relevant bargaining council. Yeah. Does mediation come into that at all, or is it something specific to, you know, large numbers of employees or trade unions?
No, most definitely so. I mean, mediation is as appropriate in disputes between individuals as it is between disputes involving collective entities like employers and trade unions. Okay. And indeed, most people have now come to recognize in labor disputes that agreed outcomes, even between individuals or so-called rights disputes, dismissal disputes, are preferable to imposed outcomes, because they give the parties an element of discretion and choice as to the basis upon which they might settle. And certainly outcomes that are agreed as opposed to outcomes that are imposed tend to carry with them greater credibility with the parties.
Right. Charles, that's all the time we have this evening. Thank you very much for joining me in the studio. And to you at home, thank you very much. See you next time. Goodbye.
Thanks,
Law at Work is sponsored by Perrett van Niekerk Woodhouse Macholo, leading labour law specialists representing businesses throughout South and Southern Africa, as well as Case Law, the quick, fast and easy labour law search engine. Case Law, the quick, fast and easy labour law search engine.